coming out. I appreciate you all being here despite the pandemic and all this stuff. It's great to be back in action. And I just kind of want to get a feel for where everyone's at with this topic. How many of you kind of know what Notgeld is already? Oh, wow. Okay, great. This is awesome. And how many of you are familiar with NFTs? Not as many. Okay, not as many. All right, well, yeah, that's kind of what I figured with a numismatic crowd like this. So maybe I'll spend a little bit more time on the concept of the NFT because I want to kind of compare this a little bit. If we look at this right here, what we're looking at is a collage of this guy's artwork, Goplen. He's one of the biggest stars of the NFT space. He's an artist, and these are all artworks that he's created. And that digital file right there sold for $69 million, right? And you know, there's a coin on display here at this convention here that is supposed to be the most valuable coin, and I forgot how much was that? How much?
18.7 million.
18.7 million. So here we've got a JPEG file, a digital file, the kind of thing like we used to right-click, save as, download for free, right? Selling for $69 million because it's one of a kind and it represents a famous artist. Nobody else can own this, and it's a token that exists on the blockchain. Are you guys familiar with the blockchain a little bit? Bitcoin? Not so much. All right. Okay. So we'll get into that, but let me just.
Can I hold the microphone up?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Hi there.
So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I made my own collage here. I like my collage a lot better. I don't know about you. But these are all pictures of Notgeld, right? And it's not that different from people, right? Because this is some pretty spectacular art. It's really colorful, it's wild, it's crazy stuff. So I had a store called Notgeld Market, and I know a lot of people say Notgeld. That's kind of like one of my pet peeves. I'm sorry about that. Because there's all these videos out there that are like, oh, it's called Notgeld because it's not money. But that's not what not means, right? Not in German is nicht. That would be Nichtgeld. But Notgeld is, Not is a crazy word. It has so many meanings, right? And it means emergency money. That's how it started out. We'll talk about that. But then over time, Not has these other meanings, like misery and poverty. In our use of the word need in English, I think that's where the word need comes from in a certain sense. When we say like in a time of need, that would be a note site, a time of note, right? And so this was definitely a time of need, a time of misery, lack, poverty, want after World War I in Germany. Yeah?
Isn't that note on the middle left an actual banknote?
You're right. Forget this one.
So that's not Notgeld.
Right, yes. That is a German national banknote. That's correct. 20 trillion marks. Sorry about that. By that time, though, they were printing so much of it, and it was so crazy that I think people were starting to use the word Notgeld to talk about regular banknotes a little bit. But yeah, technically that one is not Notgeld. This guy's an expert. Already you nailed two things, man. You did the fungible thing and the banknote. You don't even need the token. So then in 2019, I decided to kind of try to do a different business other than the Notgeld, and I wanted to do something with music, and I was one of the first people to discover NFTs as related to music, and I kind of came up with a template for how musicians could release their music as an NFT and hopefully get some of these big profits like the art people have been doing. And now, actually, as I'm going to point out later, thanks to my experience with numismatics and everything, I was able to put together a company that really I think will be hopefully the future of music NFTs. So how are NFTs and Notgeld similar? They both derive their collectible value from the art and its rarity, and also from their form as a type of currency. So they have the form of currency, but maybe not really the substance, right? When you look at Notgeld, it was issued by a town or maybe even a person, and it had an expiration date that was sometimes even in the past, or maybe it was never really meant to be redeemed or cashed in. It had, it looked like money, but it maybe really wasn't actually money, right? It was kind of a pseudo money. And NFTs are the same way. So a non-fungible token, let's get into this a little bit. A non-fungible token, first of all, what is a fungible token? That's like a dollar, right? A dollar is fungible because every dollar is the same as another dollar, and every dollar can be divided. You get $0.01, you get $0.02, whereas a non-fungible token can't be divided, and it represents something unique. And in this case, it represents art, right? So a piece of art has a token that represents ownership of that file. And Notgeld kind of represents the same thing, right? You own a piece of art, you own a piece of money. It's in the form of money anyway, but it's really backed by the artistic, collectible, creative nature and how rare it is. And they also kind of represent a community. This is community currency. Notgeld was issued primarily by towns to support themselves during the really lean times after World War I. And you know, the same thing happens with the blockchain, right? These non-fungible tokens, they play to their community. Maybe if it's, say, Ethereum. Has anyone heard of Ethereum? All right, okay, so a lot of these NFTs exist on the Ethereum blockchain, right? And so people that buy these, well, a lot of them represent the Ethereum community, right? They have pictures of their logo or in some way, you know, representing that community. That is a very mass market approach. It's a pragmatic approach to marketing what sells to collectors. And so you got into some political extremes. And it's really crazy because they kind of happened, these two things, the Notgeld, the development of Notgeld and the development of NFTs happened almost exactly 100 years apart. So the first NFT was made in 2014. The first German Notgeld was made in 1914. And
Well,
NFTs.
then it was really Kriegskeld.
Kriegskeld, yeah, war money, exactly, yeah. That's my next slide. Let's get into that. So, how Notgeld arose. So July 28th, 1914, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia at Germany's urging. Germany wanted this war. They were like, yeah, let's go, World War I. And right away they went off the gold standard. Germany suspended the gold standard, and all of a sudden, gold and silver coins were worth more as gold and silver, and the first Notgeld was issued like the same day. They had to rush this stuff out. So 1914 Notgeld is not very pretty. This is the Kriegskeld this guy's talking about. I should get your name so I can have it back in front of you. But yeah, so we have this 1914 Notgeld. It's basically wartime script. Not pretty, not collectible at the time. It was just issued out of necessity. And necessity is one of the meanings of note. So we could think of this Notgeld as maybe a necessity money or, you know, emergency money, however you want to look at it. And then in 1915, this is also related to World War I, we started to see Lagergeld, which is, Lager is a camp. And these are World War I prisoner of war camps. This particular one, Döberitz, is known for being the place where British World War I POWs were held. And so that's another type of Notgeld. There's all these different types. And it kind of evolved in a way that is parallel to the NFT here. Because now, starting in about 1916, 1917, you're getting into circulating Notgeld. And circulating Notgeld is interesting because it starts to cross the line where they're aiming for a collector's market, right? They don't want people to redeem these. They don't want them to take them to the local bank and have the city have to pay to that person's account to redeem this note. They want the collector to put it in an album and keep it. And so they started getting more and more collectible. And these are both specimens. I know this guy's already noticed that. You see these two that have no serial number there. If you see any ones out there on the floor later, they don't have the specimen, or the serial numbers, they're probably specimens. So snipe those up. I've gotten some good deals here at these ANA things, because people don't know that. And then this one is also a specimen, that ungültig, right down there. So here's one from the city of Danzig. Now there are two places, Danzig, and does anyone know the other one? There are two places that were actually kind of independent countries, just thanks to some weird fact of the Treaty of Versailles. So their Notgeld is listed in the standard catalog of world paper money. Danzig, and does anyone know the other one?
Yes.
It was in the Baltic states, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's in Lithuania today.
I can't remember the name.
Memo.
Memo, right.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like Memo, right? But in German, if it was Memo, it had two M's in the middle, right? But Memo. So series Notgeld then finally is when it is just like the ultimate flowering. Now this is really what's like non-fungible tokens, because circulating Notgeld, yeah, they wanted people to collect it, they wanted people to take it out of circulation, but you could redeem it. Whereas with series Notgeld, they just went hog wild, right? They made it so you basically couldn't redeem it or it was too difficult, and why would you want to? This is the stuff that is strictly collectible, and this is 1921 primarily, exactly 100 years ago.
And wasn't that roughly 7,000 marks to the dollar at the beginning of the year?
Something like that. I don't know the
So
exact.
this denomination would be meaningless as far as circulating.
Right, yeah, it was very, very little. I mean, yeah, I don't know the exact figure, but yeah. The United States dollar was extremely strong at that time, and we'll talk about that too. So series Notgeld was issued in sets. And there are some common motifs that are very similar with NFTs, right? Because people were very conscious of the fact that they were creating this money out of thin air, just like with the NFTs, right? They're just creating these non-fungible tokens, like this one, I think sold for millions of dollars, right? There's another beetle, and you've got the motif of the bull crapping money. And then here we have the same thing exactly 100 years ago with the donkey. And a lot of these are written in dialect. They have that real local flavor, and a lot of it you can't get anymore. And so it's not like normal German, not high German. It's fun if you're into that kind of thing. But I don't know if you can see this here, but this says, Ein Esel, der Dukaten shit. So it's shitting ducats, right? So same thing, exact same thing. It's, and often the dialect is closer to English, so it gives us a bit of an advantage as English speakers, I think. And here's a beautiful one. This is from the city of Gangelt, which is on the border with Netherlands. One of the most beautiful and sought after series, very hard to find complete. And here they are minting a gold coin in 1360. And the whole theme of hard money, gold coins, gold and silver being money, and oh my God, don't we wish we had that back? That's a huge feature of Notgeld. And the idea that, paper money is kind of worthless and all those things. Sorry, paper money collectors, I know I'm one. But that was a huge theme for Notgeld, and it's a huge theme for the cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFT space, right? So you see a lot of NFTs NFTs that portray blockchain and crypto as real money, as hard money, compared to paper fiat, that kind of thing. And it's appropriate too, because most of our money today isn't paper money, right? It's just numbers, right? And so now people want to make those numbers more secure or have a limited supply. Yeah.
Actually, that was always the case. They didn't realize until the 1890s that there was this money multiplier, and most money was on the ledger in the bank, and not actual physical money.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
Even with gold.
Inflation is like the German Urangst. It's their primordial fear, right? And I think it started with, was it France? They had that whole thing with the French Revolution.
Well, they had the South Sea Bubble of the 1720s with the paper money.
That's right. Yeah. So the Germans have always known about this, and in Goethe's, the second part of Faust, the first act, is all about just creating wild amounts of paper money. I mean, and it's so funny that the Germans got into this after having that huge example in one of their biggest pieces of literature of all this bad stuff that will happen if you just print money wildly. But yeah, we did anyway. So here's an example of something that is a make-work project for artists. So a lot of people were out of work, they had no money, and they, the German state of Mecklenburg, they decided to honor a local author, Fritz Reuter, and he's a dialect author. Like so many of these things, they write in dialect, not in regular German. And this was like a make-work project for 5 artists, and they all had their own styles and things, and there were, 70, I think, sets in total. Each one had 3 notes, so 210 notes is a complete set of Reutergeld. And this stuff's actually pretty cheap. It was really popular. A lot of people bought the complete set. I have some that's still in a gold embossed album, things like that. But that was exciting, and a lot of the.
What does Reuter literally mean?
Oh, Reuter is the last name of the author.
Oh, okay.
And all of the words on these notes and the depictions here are scenes from his works. He's a very prolific, Low German author from Mecklenburg. And the Low German that they speak in Mecklenburg has kind of a Slavic influence. It's a little more difficult for me. There's a great book, though, where all of these are translated into High German. So if any of you read High German, I can definitely give you that reference. It's very helpful. Here's a great one. And this, I don't know if most of you are not familiar with NFTs, you might not see the connection here, but like just trying to make things wild, just crazy. Stretch the boundaries, be politically incorrect, whatever it is. So this is a wine cellar, and they wanted people to buy this note and keep it and not spend it, not cash it in for wine, right? Like maybe if you bought some wine at this place, you would get this in change. And the idea was, well, if you got that in change, you wouldn't cash it in again, right? They get to keep the money. And as you can see, something like this with such a low serial number, 773, probably a good sign that it's valuable if you're out there on the floor later. And particularly the art. I mean, you guys can look at it, yourselves, right? And just see, wow, this is eye-catching. Man, I should pick that up. It's probably only, a few bucks or something. And so yeah, the series Notgeld was issued in sets called series. I wanted to show this one in particular. How many of you saw about the floods in Germany recently? Yeah, this was the town that was destroyed so bad, and you can kind of see the circular shape. I don't know if you saw the city of Arbeiter. You can kind of see here. This is like in all those pictures where it was flooded. These are the areas, that round circle of the whole town that was flooded. And luckily, though, I think I have the largest collection of Arbeiter Notgeld. I have almost 100 copies of their sets, so that's safe. Their Notgeld was not destroyed, and if they need anything to repopulate their museum, I'd be happy to see it. Here's another set. I love envelope sets. This is my own personal OCD, but for me, when it has the original envelope, that has the story and everything, like that's what really gets me excited. And this one's really interesting because this is the Anabaptist series from Münster. And Münster is where they kind of tormented these Anabaptists. Does everyone know what an Anabaptist is?
They were the precursors to the Amish.
Exactly, yes. So during the Protestant Reformation, things got really crazy. I mean, you can imagine, it was like end times, whatever to these people, because suddenly they could read the Bible, and that had been their whole life, but it just was in Latin or whatever, but suddenly, wow, okay, I can understand this. And some people got really radical, and one of them especially was Thomas Münzer, and all these people who, as you can see here, this guy is being tortured or shot, and I mean, things got really crazy. And there was, a lot of these Anabaptists who were put down very violently or led rebellions, that kind of thing. And this set tells the whole story here, and it's very much in dialect, but then the booklet explains it in High German. And I think, even at that time, they weren't really expecting that people could read the phonetically spelled dialect, if they weren't from the area. And that was kind of the idea, was this was something exclusive to their area. And I have all these dialect dictionaries I have to get into to try to figure these out. But I love doing translations. Now here's something, when I see this art, I think, wow, this is great art. I love this, but it's actually making fun of this art style. And so now we're getting into a little bit of the political extremism. This is actually very racist set from the League for the Protection of, is it League for the Protection of German Culture, I believe. And it's, if you look here, you can see, this is like, 1920s Berlin, right? We've got the flapper, and here we have an anti-Semitic stereotype, I believe anti-African stereotype, maybe this is too, I don't know. And even though, we like this style of art because it reminds us of that time, I think they were actually, much like the Nazis were later, equating this style of art with all of the problems that Germany was experiencing or something like that. And so a lot of Notgeld becomes kind of a tool for, discovering how the Holocaust and things like that came about, because Hitler was forming his opinions at this time. Mein Kampf was written in 1923 at the very height. I mean, it was written in November of 1923, the very peak of the inflation. And most of his ideas were formed in that 1919 to 1922, 1923 range, and he was pretty much set at that point. He was a true believer. He believed all the lies or whatever that were popular at that time. and became their biggest purveyor. And so, I mean, that's kind of what got me into it. I was a graduate student at UC Davis teaching German, and they kind of set us all down. First year, I'm in graduate school, I'm thinking, I'm going to conquer the world, I'm going to be a doctor, all this stuff, it's going to be great. And they set us down, and they're like, okay, German teaching is going away everywhere. Right now, there are 500 people who are going to graduate with German PhDs, and there's like 11 jobs, and all of those are going to go to people whose departments have been downsized to massive resumes, right? So there's no way you're going to get a job. Just forget about it. It's going to be hell on earth. So I was like, maybe Notgeld wouldn't be a bad plan B. And I got into it because a lot of this stuff, how could you not want to find out like what really led to the Holocaust, what really was the environment, And so when we have that reaction to stuff like that previous one, we're like, wow, man, get rid of that. That's horrible. I mean, that's the reaction I guess we should have, right? And that's why moving on from that reaction, we realize, okay, well, maybe we need to share this with people so that they can have that reaction. It's like visiting Dachau or Auschwitz or something like that, Your first reaction should be, let's tear this place down, let's burn it down, let's get rid of this, But then you realize, okay, it's important that people have that reaction and that we see and we understand where this stuff can lead. And here we have another series that is thankfully will leave that racist stuff behind, because really, most of it was not. There's just that element. But there's a city that is on the border with Holland. And of course, all the countries around Germany, with the exception of Austria, they weren't issuing Notgeld, right? They were very rich. Switzerland, no Notgeld. Netherlands, no. I mean, they're doing great. But they love to come over to Germany and shop with their money because, they're rich then. So you see all these people smuggling. So this is the Smugglers series. And you see this guy being shot at here, coming back from Holland. So smuggling was a big thing during that time. And here we have another kind of political one. And it's, of course, Bismarck. And another envelope set. I love these envelope sets. You see how the envelope there matches the whole series. And this is a fairly inexpensive one. And definitely a nationalist, patriotic kind of a thing. Which is, very similar to what we see here. Like with this, this is a very seminal NFT. Again, from Beeple. He created this NFT that was based around the 2020 presidential election, And this NFT would change the picture depending on who won the election. And if Trump lost, which he did, it became this picture here, which is like a defeated Trump with anti-Trump graffiti scrawled all over him, or whatever, right? So this is like very starkly political, right? And the same thing was going on, again, exactly 100 years ago. In 1920, we had the Treaty of Versailles, and they held plebiscites in all these little towns. And of course, all these little towns are making Notgeld, and what's the big thing on their mind at that time is, are we going to vote to be part of Denmark? Are we going to vote to be part of Germany? And they all had different opinions on the subject. Obviously, this town felt like Denmark was the answer, and they are today part of Denmark. So, and of course, they also, see the machinations of the great powers behind everything. And so you can see the picture there of Uncle Sam, right? And so in the carving up of Europe, everyone there locally, I think, was seeing the hand of France and, America cutting up the lines at the table or whatever with the Treaty of Versailles and the 14 points, another huge topic with Notgeld. And then, again, 100 years later, we're starting to get into inflation here. 2021, maybe next year, maybe the next year after that, some of these chickens will come home to roost. Well, 1922, 1923, that's when Germany started hitting really bad inflation, like really runaway hyperinflation. So the heyday of the series Notgeld, which was just for the collector's market, it's kind of over at this point, right? 1922, suddenly Notgeld is emergency money again. During the series Notgeld time, it was almost like kind of a pun when they called it Notgeld. For them, it was like poverty money or misery money, right? It was a joke, and they made fun of it. And they had fun with the art, talking about all those things. But now, suddenly, we really need to issue new banknotes like every week, every month, whatever it is, because values are just changing so often. So Notgeld is printed out of necessity again, and the paper mark is just, completely spiraling out of control and, ultimately does go to zero. Oh, and here's those Memo Notes. This is an example of 1922 note that kind of represents to me the transition between series Notgeld and then the 1922 inflation Notgeld. And part of it is just that it's a larger format. This is a big note here, right? Compared to a lot of the series Notgeld. It wasn't, physically as large. And, it's still, though, very much aimed at a collector's market. It's designed to be beautiful. It's backed by the art, right? No one's going to spend this with this beautiful art on it. They're not even going to want to fold it or anything. They're going to want to keep it in an album, and then the city gets to keep all the money. And Memo's very complicated, right? Because it was technically an independent country. And obviously the people there, I guess, are the remnants of the Germans that were there from, World War I and all of that. But it was actually under French administration. So if you get these graded by PMG or something, it says French administration, even though it's in like Lithuanian. And also in 1922, we started seeing series Notgeld being reused as inflation Notgeld. And here we have some inflation overprints. This is a 50 mark note from the city of Alma. Oh, sorry, a 50 Pfennig note, 50 cent, right? Note that became a 50 mark note just by virtue of this overprint. And again, if you're out there on the floor and you see some of these, you might want to pick them up if they're only a couple bucks, because that makes it a lot more valuable. Now, 1923, this is when things really start to get exciting with inflation. And we've got an artist here. This is the most famous artist, I think. Maybe some of you know different, but I think this is the most famous artist who did Notgeld. His name was Wenzel Hoblich. Is anyone familiar with Wenzel Hoblich? Yeah. Okay, so we didn't have maybe like, a Monet or something doing Notgeld, but we had Wenzel Hoblich, and he was pretty awesome. He was a kind of a wild modernist artist, and if you look at some of his other art, it's very similar to NFT art today. Really bright, almost digital-looking colors, but he's doing this in the 20s. And here we have a burning ship. This is a 5 million mark note, 1923. The values just go crazy. By July of 1923, we're getting into the millions, and then in December, we're hitting like 100. Well, actually, even in November, even 100 trillion. And then in December, it's We'll talk about what happens in December. And here's another one from Wenzel Hoblich that I always really liked. Sold a lot of these. This is I think the all-seeing eye kind of represents God, providence, seeing the suffering of the German people due to the inflation, right? We've got these people suffering amidst those numbers. Right there. And maybe, does anyone else have a different interpretation? I could be wrong, but yeah, some people might think this is some kind of Illuminati symbolism. I don't know, but I think that all-seeing eye here represents, the eye of providence witnessing the suffering of the German people. That's my take.
It looks like there's like a tear coming out of his eye there.
Exactly.
And
Thank you for providing evidence for my thesis.
And the people are worshiping it. They have their hands up in pleading to it.
Absolutely, yeah. Like somebody deliver us. Like, how can this go on? Yeah, like somebody stop this, because somebody needed to stop it, and ultimately they did. At the end of 1923, outlawed Notgeld. And then here we have Faux Winkel. I don't have much time here, so I want to give kind of one representative series of inflation Notgeld. So this is a particular city that got pretty creative with their inflation Notgeld and issued it as kind of a series as the denominations increased. And this one, I always like this one because it has a 666 serial number, and this is like a number play rhyme from Goethe's Faust. The witch is 1 times 1. So she's, it's just a bunch of nonsense with numbers, but it's a very famous thing. It's, kind of like the German Macbeth or something, right? Like bubble, bubble, toil and trouble. Here it's like, you must understand, from 1 make 10, let the 2 go, make the 3 the same, now you're rich. It's just like random stuff.
But it rhymes in German.
It does rhyme. It sounds a lot better than my off-the-cuff translation there. Lose the 4 from 5 and 6, so says the hex, the witch. You know, it does rhyme. And then, so here, now we're getting to 50 billion. 50 billion, milliarden. So that's another thing. This will throw you off because their counting is different when you get up to these big numbers, right? So you've got millionen, that's fine, millions. But then you've got milliarden. So 50 milliarden, that is 50 billion. And then eine Billion, they do have a billion in German, but eine Billion is actually what we call a trillion. And so with this one, we've got these prices going around the outside that kind of start to document the prices of various things. And they keep these same items along the outside until finally they get to the 5 trillion mark, which I do have one of those up here, because that is a very interesting note, especially being here in Chicago, because it has Chicago on it. But yeah, we see what? 1 liter of water is 2.2 million marks. It's a bargain. A pound of salt, 800 million. An egg is 2 billion. 2 billion for an egg? A liter of milk is 4 million. And then always the very last one is ein Sarg, a coffin. And so here, a coffin is 450 billion marks. And when was this? What's the date on there? Oh, it must be on the other side.
30th October,
30th October. Oh,
upper left corner.
oh, you got it. Thanks. And yeah, here's now 1 trillion, eine Billion mark. And we've got the Goethe's Faust paper thing here. But actually, this is from the first part of Goethe's Faust, which doesn't have that thing. And what is this? A coffin is now 90 trillion. 90 trillion for a coffin. So you'd have to have 90 of these notes right here on the 23rd of November. So what is that? That's 3 weeks later, right?
Wasn't that the last day?
Or
Wasn't that the conversion day, was the 23rd of November?
was that the last day they issued stuff like this or something?
Wasn't that when they switched to the Rentenmark?
I believe it was like January 1st, 1924 or something.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's getting towards the end. I mean, by this point, everyone knew it was over for the mark, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, from the 30th of October to the 23rd of November, I mean, it's not even a month. You see that kind of a change. So hopefully we don't get there. I mean, when inflation happens, it happens quickly, evidently. And then finally, this is the highest denomination note from the city of Fulfinkel. And actually, Fulfinkel doesn't exist today. It's part of Wuppertal in Germany. And these are the final prices, and that's only 7 days after the 1 trillion. Now we were on the 30th of November, and a liter of water is now 250 million marks. Oh, a coffin is still 90 trillion. I guess it didn't go up anymore.
They compare it with July of 1914.
Ah, yes, July of 1914. And that's important because July, that was the last month that they were still on the gold standard, right? August 1914, no more gold standard. But July 1914 it was. But check this out. This is America, right? We've got Chicago. Isn't this a great map? Didn't they draw it well?
You were a bomb.
I mean, I really recognize that. But yeah, this is the only Notgeld that I know of that has Chicago on it. It has St. Louis, New Orleans, all these things. So, you know, I thought I had to show this here today. But yeah, the poem there by Goethe is so important, I think. America, you have it better. And what are those pictures here? These are our gold coins. Those are the American gold coins. That's what they all wanted to have, were those American gold coins. America, you have it better. America, du hast es besser. Because we had the gold standard at that time. Yeah, I mean, we were at that time, you know, a powerhouse that they could not hope to match, at least when it came to the economy. And so in the very last month of 1923, we had the very complete collapse of the paper mark. And the very final kind of Notgeld is called wertbeständiges Notgeld. And wertbeständig means like of stable value. And if you look on here, what is the denomination? 1 gold mark, or what is it? 10/40 of a dollar. So they invented this new gold marks, not the old gold mark. Like they went off the gold mark in 1914, but now, you know, kind of a marketing gimmick, I guess. they called this new thing that only lasted about a month a gold mark, and that's because mark is an interesting word. Mark isn't just like a dollar. Mark, its original meaning is a unit of weight. So they were saying that this is a certain unit of weight, and this is, believe me, not the original unit of weight that a mark was. It's a much smaller amount of gold now. But the gold mark then was worth a certain amount in US dollars. And so the idea was you could redeem this for gold. But what kind of gold? Not actual gold, US dollars, right? So if you wanted to cash this in, they would give you gold for it, but that gold would take the shape of a US, currency that was backed by gold at the time. Did somebody have a comment? No? All right. So I just want to briefly finish up before I take some questions here. And I just want to say that, I feel like, benefited greatly in my life from knowing this. And when the NFTs thing started happening, the non-fungible tokens started becoming big collectibles. When did that happen too? During the pandemic, right? Suddenly physical collectibles were kind of yucky, coin shows canceled, all those things. It was like the only thing we could collect was digital stuff, right? And so maybe it was a bit of a fad there, I don't know. But by studying that trajectory, what happened with Notgeld, where the collectible value, that was really just kind of a flash in the pan. And what people were after was stable value, something that wasn't going to just lose its value, or they didn't have to hope for a secondary collector's market or something like that, but something that really was going to hold its value, and obviously against the German market was going to appreciate greatly. Knowing that, I was able to start a company that was able to, see that coming and be the next music NFT well in advance, and be pretty confident that I knew that that was what was going to happen based on what happened with Notgeld. And so, yeah, numismatic history, some of the most important history, and it does teach us some of the most important lessons. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
So when you compare fungibility to tangibility,
Yes.
I mean, I know that if my house burns down, my blockchain is safe on the public ledger, but my Notgeld would be gone.
Yeah.
Do you see a resurgence in interest in this field because of the relationship with NFTs and because of its tangibility?
I don't know. I mean, I have not found Notgeld to be super popular. I mean, that's kind of the reason why I was in the process of getting out of the business. I felt like most of my customers were fairly old, and they weren't being replaced by young people, and everybody was into the cryptocurrency and that kind of thing. I didn't set out to make a cryptocurrency startup, but everything's kind of going that way, so. Yeah, I would love to see a resurgence. That would be awesome, because I sure do have a lot of money.
So at the beginning of the war, there were a number of notes. I think they were official issues that used the term Kassenschein.
Yeah.
Can you describe that? Because I forgot how that worked.
Well, I mean, Kasse is, cashier, right? So a Kassenschein literally would be like a teller's note or something like that. And they had all these different, categories for what things were. And the national banknotes, I'm not as familiar with the exact, what, define that. But I think, was that?
Because the Ostmark that they used for the occupied Eastern Europe, they had Darlehkassenschein.
Darlehenskassenschein, yeah. So that's an interesting concept. So a Darlehen is like a loan, right? So a Darlehenskassenschein would be a promissory note of some kind. So that's the idea that, it's not really money, but, something that is the promise of money, I guess. And I know they started using that in 1920 with the national notes when the Weimar Republic started. The Darlehenskassenschein. And I think that was more of just an official move away from the gold standard, because the first move away from the gold standard, it's technically Germany didn't abandon the gold standard, they just suspended the convertibility of paper notes into gold, but that's the same thing. Yeah.
I was wondering about your thoughts about printing on different media, I have some on silk and linen and leather and even aluminum foil and gold foil.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, that's kind of a form of the Wertbeständiges Notgeld, right? Because they have an intrinsic value a little bit with the silk or the leather. And I do have a nice silk note here.
Wasn't it just one town that was doing all that fancy different materials?
That's right, yeah. here's one from that city. It was the city of Bielefeld. I don't know if you can see this, but this one's embroidered. You should come up and take a look at this. But it's got that rutabaga or turnip that was such a symbol for the Germans because that's how they made it through the winter of 1915, 1916. It was called Turnip Winter. And they basically slaughtered all the pigs, and then they ate the root vegetables, which would normally be given to the pigs. And so this smiling rutabaga, smiling turnip, whatever it is, became a symbol then for the German spirit of we're going to make it through this or whatever, and we'll just see what the hogs eat, I guess. But yeah, Bielefeld was the city that made all this. And I do have another leather one up here too. I can pull that one out. Yeah, the leather stuff, the foil stuff, I think, had its own intrinsic value, and it seems worthless. Tin foil, but it was more valuable than paper.
It wasn't just Bielefeld, because two Australian towns is wooden, Notgeld, you got the leather.
Yeah.
One Australian town is Notgeld using postcard slot. Instead of putting a postcard on the back, they printed Notgeld.
Right, yeah.
I've seen the other side.
So yeah, the city of Huddersfield in the Vienna Woods, right? In Austria, they had a lot, and their first wooden series, I sold a complete set of number 76. It was 3 of number 76, and they only made 100 copies of those. And that was a really rare one. And then they have the more common ones, which have the actual art. But yeah, Huddersfield, that's a big one. And then, there was another wooden issuer that's very rare. I do have one of those. I did not bring it. But I have a black leather piece over here. That's very nice. I also, if someone wants to see it, I have a 100 trillion mark note over here. It's like the highest denomination issued. And I do have some of those Wenzel Hablich notes over here. I have the US one. That one. I have that one over here. And I do have, speaking of postcards, I also have one that it's a continuation of a Notgeld series where they were going to keep going with this Notgeld series forever, but for whatever reason, the city didn't want to print it. So the remaining 8 notes, they just issued them as postcards. So I have one of those over here. And I also have a pretty rare set just illustrating that the political stuff goes both ways. There's a very radical left-wing set here that was issued by the SPD, which is like just the liberal Democratic Party or whatever of Germany today. But back then, they were very radical. And those notes actually have Marx and Friedrich Engels on them. So yeah, those are nice, and also a 5 trillion mark train note that's very rare. A lot of people like those train ones. Any other questions? We only have a few minutes. Yeah.
Back to NFTs.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the 1 cent magenta stamp that was sold to Stanley Gibbons, and now there's talk about them maybe making it into some sort of NFT? I just wondered what your.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I have seen that. I mean, I saw there was a Swiss company that's doing this thing where they're storing collectibles like inside a mountain, and then you can just trade the digital ownership of whether it's a stamp or gold or jewelry or whatever as an NFT, and they'll store that stuff for you securely. So it could be something like that. That could actually be the future of numismatics.
I've heard a little bit of talk, but nobody seems to know exactly what they're going to do. They want to sort of share the ownership of this. It's the rarest stamp in history.
Yeah.
They kind of want to share it, but they're not sure how they're going to do it. And NFTs was something that was thrown at.
Well, I think it's great, but it kind of threatens, things like what we're doing now or whatever. It's, I love the whole thing with this, and at least with Notgeld, there's just so much of it. I know they'll never get it all online or whatever. But
It sounds like they're trying to monetize and marketize. So, we had this whole thing, I think most of us have witnessed the rise of the slabs because you have all these investors coming in and they don't know the coin, so they have to read the slab. And that was one way, but then they made these mutual funds out of it you could invest in. But if you take an actual item and you tokenize it and you can divide it up a million ways, people can spend $10 and now they own a piece of a $10 million stamp or coin or
that
whatever.
is exciting, yeah. Someone should tokenize that $18 million 1930 Goplen. Did I see a question back there?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around this whole discussion here.
Yeah.
It's very, this was obviously made for general distribution. Music is made for general distribution. Copies of art are, but then there's sort of the original source item itself, right? So if you monetize and say like music, whatever, you have to have a unique copy of it, or the original copy or something like that, which is almost copied perhaps, many, many times, but the only reason it's being valued is because it was the original one, and it's being sort of identified as unique.
Yeah, well, I think you're nailing it. I mean, like, there's so many things that we haven't done with NFTs yet, and just representing a particular digital file is, so small compared to what we could do. Yeah, I'm sorry. Last one, I guess.
Just in general, being a beginner in all this, is there a certain reference or something to start out in Notgeld?
That's, I really wish there was, and that's been one of my life goals, is to create like the first sort of,
There's a series of catalogs issued in Germany. You can find them on AB books, but
Yes.
they're not all that cheap, and there's lots and lots of them.
Yeah, there's like 12 catalogs. There's a series called Deutsches Notgeld, and it's great. It's